A secret at the altar that blew up everything. If you've ever thought your life was perfectly in control, this story is about to shatter that illusion. Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more jaw-dropping, emotional stories like this one. The soft murmur of the string quartet playing a classic wedding march suddenly fractured. A violin gave a sharp, jarring screech, piercing the silence of the wedding tent. And in that precise moment, Alexander Sterling saw her. On a small, candlelit stage, bathed in the soft amber glow of the late afternoon, stood Ilara. His Ilara. An old, familiar acoustic guitar rested on her lap. But it wasn't the guitar that stole his breath, nor the melancholic melody she began to play. It was the subtle, yet unmistakable, curve of her belly beneath a simple navy blue dress. Pregnant. His ex-wife, the woman he'd let go 8 months ago, was pregnant, and she was singing at his wedding. The late August sun cast a golden hue over the Napa Valley vineyards, a perfect backdrop for the sprawling Sterling family estate. It was a scene straight out of a magazine, a testament to the kind of wealth that could buy perfection. Ivory roses and eucalyptus garlanded every surface of the tent, their fragrance mingling with the expensive perfume of the guests. Alex stood next to his new wife, Charlotte, a vision in handmade lace, with a smile as dazzling as the diamond on her finger. He was playing his part, the dutiful groom, the tech titan finally tamed. He had just raised a crystal champagne flute, the toast to their future still echoing in the air, when the music shifted. The polished jazz band playing popular standards faded away. A single spotlight ignited on the far end of the tent, illuminating a small secondary stage he hadn't noticed before. Charlotte squeezed his hand, her nails digging slightly into his skin. "I have a surprise," she whispered, her voice a mix of sweetness and triumph. "A special musical guest, someone I know you'll appreciate." Alex forced a smile, assuming it was some Grammy-winning artist Charlotte's father had flown in. He turned, following her gaze, and his world tilted on its axis. It was Ilara. Her reddish-brown hair, now longer, was braided loosely over one shoulder. She looked like a fairy tale creature, a stark contrast to the starched shirts and haute couture gowns. She didn't look at him. Her focus was entirely on her guitar, her fingers moving with a practiced grace he knew as well as his own heartbeat. And then she began to sing. Her voice, a raw, velvety thing that had once been his private lullaby, filled the tent. It wasn't a wedding song. It was a lament, a story of lost maps and lonely roads. It was one of their songs, one she had written in their old apartment in Brooklyn, curled up on the couch with her legs in his lap. "You built your house of glass and stone," she sang, her voice trembling with an emotion so pure it was a physical blow. "You left me the garden overgrown." A murmur ran through the guests. A few people looked at Alex, their expressions shifting from confusion to recognition. His best man, Liam, moved closer, his face tight with concern. "Alex? It's—" Alex couldn't answer. He was paralyzed, his mind a frantic scramble of calculations and denial. Ilara had signed the papers. They had agreed to a clean break. No contact. He had transferred a financial settlement to her that, by any normal standard, was astronomical. A salve for his guilt. He had told himself she would be fine, that she would use it to fund her music, to build a new life. Never, in his worst nightmares, had he imagined this. And the baby. His eyes were fixed on the soft curve of her stomach. He did the math, a cold, nauseating dread coiling in his gut. 8 months since she left. The baby was due any day. It had to be his. The night before she left. It had been desperate, a last, futile attempt to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. They had made love as if they were trying to rewind time, to find their way back to the two young people who had met in a college coffee shop. His gaze flicked to Charlotte. She was watching him, not Alara. Her expression was unreadable, a placid mask of bridal bliss. But her eyes, those sharp, intelligent eyes, held a glint of something more, something calculating. Did she know? Was this her surprise? A test? A public execution? Alara's voice soared on the chorus, a heartbreaking cry that seemed to silence every other sound in the valley. The silence. It's a sound I've come to know, a seed that you planted, afraid to watch it grow. The lyrics were a dagger, a seed. His mother, seated at the family table, dabbed at her eyes with a silk napkin, likely thinking it was just a beautiful, sad song. She had never liked Alara, seeing her as an unmotivated distraction for her son. Alex's father looked furious, his jaw set like granite. He recognized Alara, and Alex could feel the heat of his anger from across the tent. He felt trapped, a specimen under a microscope. Each guest was a witness, his perfect, carefully curated life cracking apart, the flaws spreading out from that small stage. He had built this life meticulously, walling off the part of himself that was messy and real, the part that had loved Alara Vance with a ferocity that scared him. He had traded that for this, a proper, strategic partnership with Charlotte Sterling, the daughter of a rival CEO, a merger of fortunes and families, was the smart move, the right move. His father had said so. The board had approved it. But as Alara's song reached its final, fading note, the silence that followed was more damning than any accusation. In that silence, Alexander Sterling, the millionaire groom, understood a soul-shattering truth. He had left behind more than an overgrown garden. He had left a piece of his soul, and it had just returned, with a heartbeat of its own, to claim its due. 8 months earlier, the air in their Brooklyn apartment had been thick with unspoken words. The divorce papers rested on the reclaimed wood coffee table Alara had proudly bought at a flea market, a stark, white rectangle on the warm, familiar surface. Alex had just arrived from London on his private jet, the smell of leather and jet fuel still clinging to his cashmere sweater. "You're just going to give up?" Alara's voice was barely a whisper. She was hugging a pillow to her chest, her figure looking impossibly small in the cavernous loft space that had once felt so cozy. Just like that? No fight? Alex avoided her gaze, focusing on the city lights that glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He had bought her this view. He had bought her everything. Why wasn't it enough? A fight would be unproductive, Alara. It would be a mess. "Life is a mess, Alex," she shot back, her voice cracking. "Love is a mess. It's not a business transaction you can just dissolve because the quarterly projections are down. It's not that," he said, his tone colder than he intended. He was tired of the flights, the arguments, the ever-widening gulf between his world and hers. His world was boardrooms, multi-billion-dollar valuations, and relentless pressure. Her world was open mic nights, song lyrics scribbled on napkins, and a fierce, unshakable belief in things he could no longer afford to prioritize. "Then what is it?" she pleaded, her eyes glistening with tears she refused to shed. "Because a month ago, you were telling me you couldn't live without me. Last week you were in Singapore, and this week you're here with a lawyer's ultimatum." What happened in between? What had happened was his father, Alistair Sterling, a man who treated life like a chess match and saw Alara as a rebellious pawn who was threatening his king. The final proposal for the Sterling-Solaire merger hinged on stability, on a proper match. Charlotte Solaire was proper. Alara, the folk singer with an anti-capitalist soul, was not. "We want different things," he said, the words tasting like ash. It was the coward's way out, a line his father's PR team had fed him. "I wanted you," she said, her voice dropping into a raw ache. "I only ever wanted you, not the CEO, not the private jets. Just you, the guy who used to burn toast and sing off-key with me in the kitchen. That's the man you're killing, piece by piece." He hardened his heart, a necessary survival mechanism. "I've arranged a settlement," he said, pushing a second envelope across the table. "It's more than generous. It will allow you to focus on your music, buy a studio, whatever you want. You'll never have to worry about money again." He saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, and it was worse than if she had screamed at him. He had just confirmed her greatest fear, that he believed he could buy her happiness, that he could pay her off for the inconvenience of her love. "I don't want your money, Alex," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Take it." "Elara," he insisted, a hint of desperation creeping in. He needed her to take it. He needed this to be a clean transaction, a severance package for a failed merger of hearts. "Please, for me, so I can know you're okay." She finally looked at him, a long, searching gaze that stripped him bare. He felt the phantom weight of her hand on his cheek, the memory of her tracing the worry lines around his eyes. Blam! The night before he flew away for the last time as her husband, they had come together in a storm of grief and desire. It wasn't about passion. It was about desperation, a frantic attempt to find a foothold in a landslide. In the morning, they hadn't spoken of it. It was too raw, a wound they had both tacitly agreed not to touch. Now, standing in the silence of their shared history, she finally nodded. A single, sharp motion of her head. "Fine," she whispered. "I'll sign. I'll take your money. And you will never, ever contact me again. I don't want to see your name, hear your voice, or be a footnote in your perfect, successful life. We are ghosts to each other. Understood?" "Understood," he had said, the word a death sentence for the best part of himself. She signed the papers with a steady hand. He didn't know. He couldn't have known. That as she handed the documents back, she was protecting more than just her heart. She was protecting the tiny, nascent life that had taken root in their last, desperate goodbye. A seed that he had planted, afraid to watch it grow. A secret she would carry alone. Back in the Napa Valley wedding tent, the silence stretched, thin and fragile. The guests, sensing a drama far more fascinating than champagne and cake, were frozen. Elara unhooked her guitar strap from her shoulder, placing the instrument carefully in its stand. Her movements were slow, deliberate, as if she were conserving energy. She didn't look at Alex. Instead, her gaze swept over the crowd until it landed on Charlotte. A ghost of a smile touched Elara's lips. It wasn't triumphant or smug. It was something quieter, sadder, resignation. Charlotte, for her part, finally let her mask of bridal serenity slip. A flicker of anxiety crossed her face as she saw the direction of Elara's gaze. This was not going according to her plan. She had envisioned a different outcome. Alex would be shocked, maybe a little embarrassed. The guests would whisper. It would be a subtle power play, a reminder to her new husband that she knew all his secrets, that he was hers now, past and present. She had researched Elara, discovered she was a struggling musician playing in cheap bars. Offering her a generous fee to play one song at a private event in Napa was easy. It was a calculated risk, designed to expose a vulnerability and then heal it. Bonding him to her through the shared, slightly sordid secret. She hadn't counted on the pregnancy. That was a variable her meticulous research had somehow missed. Alex finally found his voice, turning to Charlotte. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Every word was clipped. "I hired a singer," Charlotte responded, her voice attempting a light-hearted tone that didn't quite land. She came highly recommended. Don't lie to me, Charlotte. Not now. Before she could respond, Ilara took the microphone. Her voice, no longer singing, was soft, but had an undeniable weight that drew the attention of every single person in the tent. Thank you, Charlotte, for this opportunity, she began, her eyes still locked on the bride. This is a beautiful wedding, and thank you, Alex. She finally turned her head, and her clear green eyes met his. The world shrank to the space between them. For the financial settlement, it was, as you said, very generous. The crowd gasped. The whispers grew louder. This wasn't some anonymous singer. This was the ex-wife. I wasn't sure if I should take this job, Ilara continued, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. It felt complicated. But your wedding planner, a Mr. Cross, was very insistent. He said the bride specifically requested the song Garden, and that the fee was non-negotiable. She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. He said you both wanted to honor the past before moving into your future. A very modern sentiment. Alex's blood ran cold. Charlotte hadn't just hired Ilara. She had specifically requested the song he knew was about their breakup. This wasn't a test. This was a public dissection. He looked at Charlotte, whose face had gone pale. The composure was gone, replaced by a nascent panic. I used some of the money you gave me, Alex, Ilara continued, her voice steady and clear, a beacon of calm in the chaos. I put a down payment on a small house in Brooklyn. It has a little yard. I've started planting a garden. For my daughter, Chloe. The words hit him with the force of a physical impact. A daughter. He swayed slightly, and Liam put a steady hand on his arm. I wasn't going to tell you, Ilara said, her gaze softening with a deep sadness that was all for him. That was part of our deal. We were ghosts to each other. I was going to do this alone. I am doing this alone. But when your wife's assistant called and offered me 5 times my normal rate to sing at an Alex Sterling's wedding in Napa Valley, well, I felt the universe had a sick sense of humor. She took a slow breath. I decided my daughter deserves to live in the truth, and the truth is, her father is Alexander Sterling, the man standing right there. She gestured with her free hand, not an accusation, but a simple statement of fact. The truth is, he didn't know about her. And the truth is, she added, her eyes meeting his again, a universe of shared history passing between them. She was conceived of love. No matter what happened after, she was. And for that, at least, I'm grateful. With that, she placed the microphone back in its stand, picked up her guitar case, and began to walk toward the side exit of the tent. She moved with a silent dignity that shamed the ostentatious display around her. The guests parted for her like the Red Sea, their faces a mix of pity, shock, and awe. No one spoke. No one moved. The string quartet remained silent. The jazz band was frozen. All eyes were on Alex, the man who seemingly had admired everything, and who had just been shown, in front of 200 witnesses, that he had lost the one thing that truly mattered. What would you do if you were in Alex's shoes? Would you have made the same decision to confront your family and new wife? Comment below to tell us what you think. The walk from the wedding tent to the main house felt like a mile-long hike. Alex's hand was still clamped on Charlotte's arm, his grip leaving marks. He didn't speak. His silence was a seething volcano. Guests avoided his gaze, whispering behind their champagne flutes. His father, Alistair, intercepted them at the grand oak doors of the villa. His face, a mask of cold fury. My office now, Alistair said, his words directed only at Alex. He shot Charlotte a look of pure contempt before turning away. Alex pushed Charlotte through the marble foyer and into the dark, wood-paneled study that served as his father's command center. He released her arm, and she stumbled back, rubbing at the red marks. "Alex, I can explain," she began, her voice trembling. "Can you?" He shot back, his voice a low growl. He paced the room like a caged animal. "Can you explain why you brought my pregnant ex-wife to our wedding? Can you explain why you requested that specific song? Can you explain this public immolation?" "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she cried, tears finally breaking through her perfect makeup. "I didn't know she was pregnant, I swear. I wouldn't have done it. I'm not a monster." "Then what are you? What are you, Charlotte?" he demanded, whirling to face her. "What was the point? To humiliate me? To show me you held all the cards?" "To show you that I knew," she confessed, her composure crumbling completely. "I knew you hadn't forgotten her. I see the way you look off into space sometimes, and I know you're seeing her. I hear you mumble her name in your sleep. I hired her because I wanted it all out in the open. I wanted you to see her for who she is now, a struggling singer. And then look at me, at this life we're building. I wanted you to choose me, consciously, to close that chapter for good. It was supposed to be our secret, a final, cleansing fire." Her logic was so twisted, so steeped in the strategic machinations of their world, that it almost made a kind of perverse sense. In their circles, love was a negotiation and marriage was a merger. Vulnerabilities were assets to be acquired and controlled. She hadn't sought to destroy him, but to possess him more completely. The pregnancy, however, was a grenade she hadn't anticipated. A cleansing fire? Alex laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You set off a bomb, Charlotte, in the middle of our lives. Of my life." "Our lives," she corrected him, taking a step forward, her tone pleading. "We can fix this. We'll issue a statement. We'll say she's a disgruntled ex-wife extorting you. We'll question the paternity. My father—" "Stop," Alex commanded, holding up a hand. The mention of her father, of press statements and paternity tests, was like ice water in his veins. This was the world he had chosen, a world where a child was not a miracle, but a complication to be managed. "Just stop talking." The office door opened, and Alistair Sterling walked in, closing it softly behind him. He ignored Charlotte, his cold blue eyes fixed on his son. "She has to go," Alistair said, his voice flat and absolute. "What?" Alex asked, confused. "The singer, Ilara. We find her. We pay her. She signs an NDA so airtight it could survive a nuclear blast. We make this disappear." "She's having my child," Alex said, the words feeling foreign and monumental on his tongue. "My grandchild," Alistair scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Allegedly. And even if it's yours, it changes nothing. It's a distraction, a liability. We are in the middle of the most important merger in our company's history. The markets open Monday. Do you have any idea what this circus will do to the Sterling Solaire stock price?" The pure, brutal calculation of his father's words hit Alex with the force of a physical blow. He looked from his father's unyielding face to Charlotte's tear-streaked one. They were the same. They saw the world as a balance sheet, and his unborn daughter was a red ink entry that needed to be erased. "This isn't a business problem, Dad," Alex said, his voice quiet, but firm. "Everything is a business problem," Alistair shot back. "You made a mistake, Alex, years ago by getting involved with that girl. You fixed it when you ended it. Now this is just a loose end. I'll have my legal team draw up the paperwork." "No." The word was small, but it filled the room. Both Alistair and Charlotte stared at him. "What did you say?" Alistair asked, his tone laced with disbelief. "I said no," Alex repeated, a strange sense of calm settling over him. For the first time in years, the fog of ambition and expectation seemed to be lifting. He saw the path his father and Charlotte were laying out for him. A life of damage control, of secrets buried under mountains of money, of emotional cowardice disguised as strategic necessity. It was the life he had been groomed for. It was the life he had almost fully embraced. But then he pictured Alara, her quiet dignity on that stage, her hand on her stomach. "I've started planting a garden. For my daughter." She wasn't building walls of glass and stone. She was planting something real, something that would grow. "This is my daughter," Alex said, looking his father square in the eyes. "This is my responsibility, and I will not make her go away." He then turned to his 3-hour-old wife. "And you and I, Charlotte, we have nothing. This was never real. It was a contract, and I believe you just breached the terms." He turned and walked out of the study, leaving his father and his bride standing in the wreckage of their perfect, calculated future. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew who he had to find. He had to find Alara. What would you do if you were in Alex's shoes? Would you have made the same decision to face your family and new wife? Comment below to tell us what you think. Alex evaded the chaos of the wedding party. He grabbed a set of keys to a black Range Rover from the valet stand, one of the estate's utilitarian vehicles, anonymous and discreet. He ignored the frantic calls from Liam, the pinging texts on his phone from Charlotte, from his father, from his mother. He just drove. He left the manicured, rolling hills of Napa Valley behind, the vineyards blurring into streaks of green and gold in his rearview mirror. He headed north on the I-5, the setting sun painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. He had no plan, just a destination. Brooklyn, 3,000 miles away. The first few hours were a blur of adrenaline and fury. Fury at Charlotte for her cruel games, at his father for his cold-blooded calculation. But most of all, at himself. He was the architect of this disaster. He had been so obsessed with winning the game that he had never stopped to ask if he actually wanted the prize. He had treated his marriage to Alara like a starter home, a charming place to live until you could afford the mansion, and he had discarded it with the same indifference. He thought of her song, "You built your house of glass and stone." It was true. He lived in a transparent fortress of his own making, designed for everyone to see his success, but for no one to ever truly get in. Alara had always been able to find the cracks, to slip through and touch the man hiding inside. That was what had terrified him. That was what his father had warned him against. Vulnerability, in the sterling lexicon, was a synonym for failure. As darkness fell, and the highway stretched out in a hypnotic ribbon of asphalt and light, his anger began to cool, replaced by a deep, empty ache. A daughter. He was going to have a daughter. He tried to picture her. Would she have his dark hair? Alara's green eyes? Would she love music? Would she be stubborn and funny and fierce like her mother? The thought was both terrifying and exquisitely beautiful. It was a future he had given up, a gift he had unknowingly thrown away. He stopped for gas and coffee somewhere in rural Northern California, the air crisp and pine-scented. Inside the dingy convenience store, the fluorescent lights hummed. He saw his reflection in the fridge door, a man in a tuxedo worth more than the car he was driving, looking utterly lost. He bought a bottle of water and a stale granola bar, the simple transaction feeling strangely grounding. Back in the car, he finally checked his phone. Dozens of missed calls, a string of text messages from Charlotte, spiraling from frantic apologies to threats. A single, ominous message from his father. "You are making the biggest mistake of your life." He ignored them all and found the one contact he was looking for. His fingers hovered over her name, still saved in his phone after all this time. Alara. He hadn't deleted it. He had told himself it was an oversight, but he knew that was a lie. It was a link, a small digital thread he couldn't bring himself to sever. He typed out a message, his thumbs clumsy. "I'm coming to Brooklyn. I need to see you. Please." He hesitated. Then he added, "I'm sorry, Alara, for everything." He hit send, his heart pounding. For the next hour, he drove in silence, watching the screen, waiting for the 3 little dots that would indicate she was typing. Nothing. The message sat there, delivered but unread. Of course. Why would she be looking at her phone? She was probably on a flight home or driving, wanting nothing more than to put this entire day behind her. Why would she want to see him? He had offered her money to go away. He had married another woman. And now, only after a public embarrassment, was he crawling back, the miles melting away under the tires. He drove through the night, past sleeping towns and endless forests. The solitude of the road, a welcome reprieve. It gave him time to think, to truly confront the man he had become. The ambition that had once felt so vital now seemed hollow. The merger, the stock prices, the legacy his father was so obsessed with, it all felt like a foreign language. He remembered a weekend he and Alara had spent in a rustic cabin on the coast of Oregon. A storm had knocked out the power. They had spent 2 days reading by candlelight, talking for hours, making love by the fire. He hadn't thought about work, not once. He had felt completely and utterly present. He had felt happy. At the end of the weekend, as they drove back to the city, he felt a pang of anxiety, the pull of his other life. She had noticed. "You're afraid of this, aren't you?" she had said softly, her hand on his knee. "Afraid of what? Not having electricity?" he had joked. "Of being happy," she had replied, her insight so sharp it startled him. "You think that if you're not striving, you're failing." She had been right. He finally saw it. His life had been a relentless climb, and he had been so focused on the summit that he had forgotten to look at the view. He had forgotten that the best parts of the journey were the moments he stopped to rest with her. Just as the first hints of dawn began to gray the eastern sky, his phone vibrated. He nearly swerved, fumbling to grab it off the passenger seat. A new message. From Alara. His heart hammered against his ribs. He pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, the engine idling in the quiet morning air. With a shaking hand, he opened the message. It was just an address. No greeting. No questions. No anger. Just an address. In a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in southeast Brooklyn. And below it, 2 words. Be careful. The address Alara had sent led Alex to a quiet street of modest bungalows from the early 20th century. It was a world away from the steel and glass towers of London or the ostentatious grandeur of Napa Valley. Here, yards were full of wild flowers instead of manicured lawns, and wind chimes provided the soundtrack instead of traffic. He found her house, a small craftsman-style home painted a cheerful sage green with a welcoming front porch. And in the tiny patch of front lawn, there it was, a nascent garden. Small wooden markers identified rows of what looked like lavender, tomatoes, and herbs. A garden for his daughter. He parked the Range Rover down the street, feeling like an alien in his mud-splattered luxury vehicle. His tuxedo was wrinkled, his face shadowed by a night's growth of beard. He looked like a man who had fled his own life, which was exactly what he was. He walked up to her door, his expensive leather shoes silent on the cracked sidewalk. For a long moment, he just stood there, his hand hovering over the doorbell, overcome with a sudden, paralyzing fear. What was he going to say? Before he could decide, the door opened. Alara was there, wearing a slouchy gray sweatshirt and leggings. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her face was free of makeup. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear and steady. She wasn't smiling, but there was no animosity in her expression either. Just a deep, exhausted calm. "I figured you'd get here around this time." Her voice was soft. She was holding a mug of what smelled like chamomile tea. "You look," he began, the word beautiful dying on his lips. It felt cheap, inadequate. "I'm fine." She gave a small, humorless smile. "Define fine. I just publicly declared you the father of my child at your own wedding. Then I took a red-eye flight, surrounded by people who recognized me from the viral video that was already circulating before we took off. But the baby is okay, and I'm not on the run. So yes, I'm fine." She gestured her head inside. "You should come in. You look like hell." He walked in. The house was small, but bright, filled with second-hand furniture, overflowing bookshelves, and plants. A half-finished painting was on an easel in the corner of the living room. Her guitar was propped against the wall. It felt more like a home than any of the multi-million-dollar properties he owned. It felt like her. "Want anything?" she asked, moving toward the small kitchen. "Coffee, water, an annulment lawyer." "Water is fine," he said, ignoring the jab. "Alara, why did you come to the wedding?" She paused, her back to him, filling a glass from the tap. She took her time before turning around, her expression thoughtful. At first it was for the money, I won't lie. It was a staggering amount for one song, enough to pay off my student loans and set up a proper nursery. When I saw the name was yours, my first instinct was to say no. Pride, you know? She handed him the glass, their fingers brushing for a fleeting second. It was like an electric shock. "But then I thought about it," she continued, sinking into the sofa and cradling her belly. "I thought about this little girl. I thought about the life I'm bringing her into. I don't want her to have a life of secrets and shame. I didn't want her to be a dirty little secret your family paid to keep quiet. And I knew. I just knew. That's what your father would try to do if he ever found out." He winced, the accuracy of her prediction hitting him hard. "So I decided to take control of the narrative." Her voice gained strength. "I wasn't going to be the pathetic ex-wife who shows up to make a scene. I was going to be a mother, speaking the truth in the most public way possible, so it could never be buried. It wasn't for you, Alex. It wasn't to hurt you or Charlotte. It was for her. So that one day when she asks about her father, the story isn't a sordid tale whispered behind closed doors. The story is that her mother stood on a stage and told the world, 'This is my daughter, and she matters.'" He sank into the armchair opposite her, the simple glass of water feeling heavy in his hand. He had been so wrapped up in his own drama, his own humiliation, that he hadn't considered her motives. He had seen it as an act of revenge or desperation. He hadn't seen it for what it was, an act of profound maternal love and protection. It was fierce, it was brave, it was everything he had once loved about her. "Why didn't you tell me, Alara?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "When you found out, why didn't you call me?" Her expression softened, a flash of the old hurt surfacing in her eyes. "And say what?" "Hey, Alex, congrats on your engagement to the heiress. By the way, remember that night we tried to say goodbye? Well, a little piece of it stuck." "What would you have done?" "I would have," he began, but he stopped himself. What would he have done? A month ago, consumed by the merger, terrified of his father, he would have seen it as a problem, a complication. He would have thrown money at it. He would have tried to manage it. He wouldn't have been the man she needed, the man his daughter needed. He couldn't lie to her. Not anymore. "I don't know," he admitted. The truth was a bitter pill. "Honestly, I don't know. And that's the problem, isn't it?" She just nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm that had separated them. a chasm he was only now beginning to comprehend the true depth of. The silence stretched between them, filled not with anger, but with the weight of 8 months of secrets and a lifetime of what-ifs. The video, as Alara had predicted, had gone viral. By the time the sun was high over the West Coast, the singer at the Sterling wedding was trending on every social media platform. The initial clip, shot on a guest's phone, was grainy and chaotic, but it was quickly followed by a professionally shot version, leaked from the official wedding videographer, a clean edit with multiple angles, complete with crystal-clear audio of Alara's song and her subsequent speech. The leak was too fast, too perfect. It was a professional job. In a sterile conference room in a Manhattan skyscraper, Charlotte Sterling watched her father, Richard Sterling, pace in front of a bank of television screens, all showing the same damning footage. Richard was a man of calculated rage, his fury a cold, precise weapon. Unlike Alistair Sterling's blustering bullying. "You leaked the professional footage?" he asked his daughter, not even bothering to look at her. "No," Charlotte said, her voice small. She was still in her $1,000 travel suit from the day before, looking like a ghost of the triumphant bride she was supposed to be. The wedding was over. The marriage was likely dead on arrival. "Don't lie to me, Charlotte," Richard said, his voice dangerously low. "The cameraman is one of ours. The footage would not have been released without an order." "I had to," Charlotte finally broke. "Alex was gone. Alistair was calling me a liability. The narrative was getting out of my control. The early phone videos made her look like a victim, a lovesick girl. The professional footage makes her look calculating. It shows her looking me in the eye. It includes my introduction surprise. It adds context. It paints a different picture. It paints the picture of my daughter being publicly cuckolded and then attempting a clumsy, transparent smear campaign against the pregnant mother of her husband's child." Richard shot back, finally turning to face her. His eyes were like chips of ice. "You've made us look weak. You've made the Sterling name look foolish." "I was trying to protect our position," she argued, getting to her feet. "This whole merger was predicated on a stable union. When that was threatened, I tried to manage the fallout. I tried to do what you would do, what you taught me to do." "What I taught you," Richard said, stepping so close she could feel the cold radiating from him, "is to never start a fight you're not certain you can win. You started a fight with a penniless folk singer, and you lost in front of the entire world because you were sloppy. You didn't know she was pregnant. That was the fatal miscalculation, an emotional, amateur mistake." The criticism, coming from the man whose approval she had spent her entire life chasing, was devastating. Charlotte had always been the perfect daughter, the brilliant strategist, the one who understood that legacy and power were the only things that endured. She had seen the marriage to Alex not as a romance, but as the culmination of her career, a merger of 2 dynasties, with her at the heart of it. Alara was supposed to be a ghost, a footnote she could exercise, elegantly. Instead, the ghost had materialized and rewritten the entire story. "What do we do now?" Her voice trembled. "Now," Richard said, turning back to the screens, "we pivot. Alistair Sterling is a dinosaur. He thinks he can solve this by burying the woman under a mountain of money and NDAs. He's wrong. The world has changed. Public perception is capital. Right now, that woman, Alara Vance, has all of it. She is the wronged mother, the symbol of authenticity versus corporate greed. She is a saint. So we're ruined?" "No," Richard said, a glint of something new in his eyes, the thrill of a fresh strategy. "We're not ruined. The Sterling Solaire brand might be. Alex is compromised. But the Sterling name can come out of this stronger than ever." He picked up his phone and called his head of PR. "Janet, I want you to draft a statement. It's from me, not Charlotte. I want to express my deep disappointment and shock at the deception perpetrated by the Solaire family. I want to express my sympathy for the young lady, Ms. Vance, who was unwittingly thrust into this painful situation. Frame it as an issue of integrity. We, the Sterlings, were deceived. We are terminating the merger agreement with Solaire Consolidated, effective immediately, due to a fundamental breach of trust and a clear lack of corporate and family governance. Charlotte stared at him, horrified. You're cutting them off? You're cutting me off? You're taking her side? I am protecting our assets, Charlotte, he said coolly. Alex has abandoned his post, and you? Alistair is in damage control mode, but the damage is done. The merger is now toxic. By cutting ties, by aligning ourselves with public sympathy with her, we seize control. We become the heroes of the story, not the fools. He was sacrificing her marriage, her reputation, to win a different war. She had been a pawn all along, just as she had tried to make Alara. The only difference was her own father was the one pushing her off the board. This was never about Alex and me, was it? She whispered, the realization dawning on her. It was always about you and Alistair. It was about you finally finding a way to cripple his company. Richard Sterling allowed himself a small, chilling smile. Business is business, my dear. I thought you understood that. He paused, his expression shifting to one of feigned sympathy. I'll arrange for an annulment, quietly. We'll say you were brave, that you made the principled decision to walk away from a dishonorable situation. In a few months, no one will remember your part in this. They'll only remember that the Sterlings don't tolerate deception. Charlotte sank back into her chair, the fight leaving her. She had played the game her father taught her, and he had just proven, with brutal efficiency, that he would always be the master. She had lost everything. And in a strange, bitter twist of irony, the person who had taken it all away wasn't Alex, or his father. It was a woman with nothing but a guitar, a garden, and the truth. And now for the big question. Do you think Charlotte deserved this? Was her punishment fair? Tell us what you think in the comments. The months that followed were a study in quiet rebuilding. Alex found a small 2-bedroom apartment a few blocks from Alara's house. He sold the one asset he had left to his name, a vintage watch given to him by his grandfather, and used the money for a down payment and a second-hand car. He started looking for work. It was a humbling experience. Without the Sterling name and resume, he was just a man in his late 30s with a spotty employment history that was impossible to explain. He took a job at a local logistics company, managing warehouse inventory. The pay was a fraction of what he used to make in an hour, but it was honest work. It was his. He saw Alara almost every day. He respected the boundaries she had set. He was Alex, not Dad yet. He went with her to doctor's appointments, sitting in the waiting room until she came out. He learned how to assemble a crib, his hands, more accustomed to a keyboard, clumsy with the tiny screws. He painted the nursery a soft yellow. He helped her in the garden, learning the difference between a weed and a seedling. They talked about everything and nothing. They didn't rehash the hurt of the past, but they didn't ignore it either. They were two people getting to know each other all over again, without the pressures of wealth or expectations. He saw the strength in her he had never fully appreciated, her resilience, her unshakable moral compass. She saw a change in him, a lightness in his eyes, a genuine smile that reached them for the first time in years. The tormented, ambitious CEO was gone, replaced by a man who seemed, for the first time, at peace. One rainy Saturday, he was helping her hang the painting from their old loft, the one she had been working on when he left. I never thought I'd see this again, he said, holding it steady while she hammered the nail. I couldn't get rid of it, she admitted. It was the last good memory. I have a lot of good memories, he said softly. The storm on the coast, the time we tried to make pasta from scratch and covered the whole kitchen in flour, the first time I heard you play garden. She stopped hammering and looked at him. You know, for months, I hated that song. It was all about what I had lost, but I was wrong. What do you mean? It's not about an ending, she said, her hand going to her belly, where their daughter was kicking. It's about a beginning, about something small and real, growing in the ruins of something big and fake. I just didn't see it yet. That night, as he was about to leave, she stopped him at the door. Alex, her voice was tentative. The guest room is empty. The baby is due soon. It might be easier if you were here. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't a promise of forever. It was practical. It was cautious. But it was an invitation. An invitation back into the house he had helped make a home. An invitation into the life he had almost thrown away. I would like that, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I would like that very much. A few weeks later, in the quiet hours of the early morning, Ilara went into labor. Alex was by her side, holding her hand, breathing with her. His presence a steady, unshakable anchor. And when their daughter was born, a tiny, perfect creature with a tuft of dark hair and eyes that promised to be green, the nurse placed her not in her mother's arms, but in his. He looked down at his daughter, his heart expanding with a love so fierce and absolute, it eclipsed every ambition he had ever had. He looked at Ilara, her face exhausted but radiant, and saw his entire world, his true north, in her tired smile. What should we call her? Ilara whispered. Alex thought of the garden, of new beginnings, of hope. Chloe, he said, the name coming to him with absolute certainty. It meant green shoot, a new growth, a new life. Ilara smiled, tears of joy rolling down her cheeks. Chloe, she repeated. It's perfect. He was no longer Alexander Sterling, the millionaire. He was just Alex, a father, holding his daughter, sitting next to the woman he loved. He was finally home. What a roller coaster of emotions. From a bombshell at a wedding to a life completely rebuilt, Alex and Ilara's journey teaches us that true wealth isn't in money, but in love, truth, and second chances. Do you think Alex made the right choice in giving up his fortune? Was his redemption deserved? We want to know what you think. Leave us your comments below and don't forget to like this video and share it with someone you love.